So hi guys, my name is Ashim and I am your host for this session, Core Java. So if you have not attended our previous session, I see a lot of people they have not attended previous session. Go check our YouTube channel and you can see we have already uploaded videos of previous session, and also we are also conducting big data sessions also. So we have uploaded video on YouTube as well. So you are new, so I would request you to uh, go to our website techindustry.in and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also our there is a link, WhatsApp chat link, where you will get latest updates about our session. So it's our WhatsApp group we have created to help you guys, uh, giving you updates and also solving your queries. Let me show you our website first. Okay, so yeah, I can see Raman is online. So hi Raman, yeah, you can start your session now.
So guys, today's session was focused on exception handling. So yeah, let me just take you to exception handling now. Okay. Okay. So before I say something, I want to understand from your point of view, if you have studied in your college days or maybe in some tutorial or somewhere or on your own, what do you mean by exception handling and why do we need it? What is the purpose of having exception handling in our applications?
Whenever an exception, this unhandling the scenario occurs, like to handle those kind of situations, we are using exception handling.
What
For
kind of
example,
scenarios?
if you are riding a bike, we don't know, like it will get puncture or something. It happens, goes down. In
Okay.
those cases, like we can't tell that it goes down or not. Like to handle that, we need a situation called exception handling.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, good example. Anybody else wants to talk about exception handling?
So I just want to tell what is it first. So exception is something which happened due to the faulty input. So to handle that, you just should know what the faulty input their message. So we have some means like we have a concept called exception handle. So exception is suppose we have something like code is run.
Can you be a little loud? It's very
Suppose
hard to hear you.
line number. Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
So, like, what happened in exception is like, suppose controller is accept some line. So there, it will form object will to the system, and customize exceptions. If we have not defined our any customized exception handle, then they will hand over to the default exception handle which Java has. So yeah, that's all. I mean, that's all I know about the exception handle. We have a try catch and throwable to handle the exception.
Okay. Fine. Yep. That's a little bit of into technical lines of exception handling. So fine. I think you are correct. Okay, we have two inputs here also to have a normal termination and prevent abrupt termination, and it's to handle something in when we have issues at runtime. So yep, guys, all of you are correct.
Yeah, also, flow of the application should not break. That's why we use exception handling.
Okay, yep, that's correct. Flow of the application should not break, right? Okay. So yep, Just back to the screen. That's correct, guys. All the definitions were correct. But then let me give one example from my side, which all of us would have seen in normal cases. So let's say we are about to, do some payment using some banking application or using Paytm, right? And we receive an OTP, okay, and then we enter it. Let's say that OTP that we receive, or you will see usually it has time of 1 minute, right? So if you enter that OTP after 1 minute, your application will not take that, will not accept that OTP, right? Or let's say you are running an application and it has asked you for some inputs or your something, and then you have given incorrectly, then it will throw some error on the screen itself, right? Or that example of OTP or online payments. So that is a very good example of handling exceptions, right? So therein there was some network error or there was an error, of having that OTP in specified amount of time. So that's how they have defined it for security purpose. So what happened at that time? The application has reacted in a way that they wanted, and the user, so that user can come to know, or user can understand that this issue has happened because of this reason, right? So what I mean to say is, for all the applications, we need to have exception handling in place. And why do we want to have it? To do what? To handle the issues, right? And to show to the user that why these issues came in the first place, right? Or what can we do to avoid those issues? That's about exceptions. Okay. So very common examples of exceptions. Memory error, right, in your phone. If you're trying to save some file, okay, you copied some file from pen drive and you're trying to put it in your phone using a data cable, right? It will, if your phone doesn't have enough memory, it will directly throw that issue that the memory you have is limited, right? Or if file system errors, yeah, that is similar, right? Disk is full. Or you have network errors. You are trying to play an online game and network goes down, right? It will show a network error. Or you're opening an banking application, network goes down, it will immediately stop at that time, right? Or if you're entering some URL, some website name, and that name doesn't exist, or you have you copied it wrongly and you've given the wrong name, right? So these are all example of exceptions or calculation errors. So we already know in mathematics you cannot divide anything by zero, right? So that is a calculation error. We should not allow that to happen. Then array errors. If your array size is limited, as we know, if you're trying to access array element which is out of your defined size, will give you array index out of bound exceptions. These are all examples of exceptions. Or if you're trying to enter an invalid data, or if a file which you want to open does not exist in the other system. So all these are issues, which should be handled by the application, or else the application may abruptly end. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
The disk is full, is that also comes under exception handling, or like
which one?
disk is full?
Yeah, if your memory, yeah, if it is a memory error, then it's not under exception. Yeah, I'll come to that. So we have multiple things when we talk about exception, right? One
Like,
is error, one is exception. So if
yeah,
there is that is out of our hands and a programmer cannot handle it, then we call it error. It's not an exception, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So a programmer or a Java developer or any other language developer, right, guys,
which can be handled.
these guys can handle only the issues
Exception.
that are there in application, or that we can anticipate. right? These issues can come in the application or might come in the application, but the
Oh.
issues that are out of developers' hands or designers' hands, those issues we cannot handle, right? And those are actually errors. For to solve the errors, we need to involve infrastructure people, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, here you can see the definition of exception handling. Exception handling is one of the powerful mechanisms to handle the runtime errors so that normal flow of the application can be maintained. Right. So, if you see the exception hierarchy here, okay, at top we have throwable. Okay, this is getting a little technical, but I'll just give the names. These are all class names. Okay, so throwable. Below that we have two. One goes towards error side and one goes towards exception, right? And under exception again we have two exceptions. One is checked exception, one is unchecked exception. Okay. So I'll talk about all this in the next slides. Okay. So when we talk about checked exception, what are checked exceptions? So checked exception is an exception which our compiler itself, they'll get to know, compiler will get to know that exception is there at compilation time, right? And not at runtime. Okay. And unchecked exceptions happen at the time at runtime. Okay. So when you have given a mathematical equation like 8 by 0, okay, at compile time, your JVM or your compiler will not be able to make out whether this issue exists at runtime or not, right? So 8 by 0 is a normal mathematical expression, right, which looks good to the compiler. But then when you actually run it, it will throw an exception, right? It will throw a math exception. Okay. So, yeah, that was about unchecked exception. It occurs at runtime when your program is actually running. Then checked exception are non-fatal to program execution because we can handle those exceptions. Okay, and the programmer or the compiler already knows that this exception is about to come up, so we can handle them, right? So checked exceptions must be handled in your code by a programmer, or you can just pass it on to your parent classes for handling. But then, in short, we need to handle checked exceptions. Okay. Then use checked exceptions for all the exceptional events that you can anticipate. Yeah. So as I already talked about. So whatever event we feel that this issue can occur, okay, we mark those exceptions as checked exception. But then the issues that we are not sure that they are about to happen, or that are out of our anticipation, we mark them as unchecked exceptions. For checked exception, we have to use exception class as the top level class. Okay. So, which means all the checked exceptions are extending the exception class. Okay. So, if we want to give some examples, we have example like SQL exception, or we have file not found exception. Okay. So, all these exceptions our compiler can know at compilation time itself, or number format exception, right? Let's say our program was expecting a string type and you have passed a number type, so that is number format exception. Or expecting a double type and you have passed an integer type. So all these are checked exceptions. And unchecked exceptions, we talk like they are fatal to program execution because we are not sure when these exceptions will come. We cannot make out, we cannot guess, right? So if these exceptions come, they can block the complete program, okay, and our application may crack down, right? Hence, we have to be very careful while working with these kind of exceptions. Yeah, and these exceptions definitely they'll terminate the program, or they'll terminate the application. But then, since we already have the hierarchy class throwable there, or we are extending runtime exception, it will terminate with an appropriate message via stack trace. Okay. Stack trace is basically a list of methods through which that exception has propagated. We will come to that, right? So let's say there was we are using three methods: method A, method B, method C. So through method A we are calling method B, and through method C we are calling method D. So we have A to B, B to C, C to D. This is the hierarchy. Okay? And the exception has come in method D. Then what happens? Method D will tell that this exception has come at this line, okay, from method D, and it will throw it back to method C. Then again method C will tell this exception has come at this line where we call method D. It will go back. So all this, detailed graph or details of that exception will be shown to you on the screen automatically, since we already have this class runtime exception at the top level. So if you're writing a checked exception, you have to make sure that it is extending exception class. And if you're using an unchecked exception, then we need to make sure that it is extending runtime exception. Okay. The famous example is null pointer exception, right? If you're trying to call a method, okay, and that method if you're trying to call a method and that method doesn't exist, or it is returning a null pointer type, okay, which is not handled in our program, then it will throw null pointer exception. And this null pointer exception itself has caused the entire industry $1 billion of money till now. So many issues this null pointer exception will give us. So this is the biggest exception that comes in the enterprise level applications, right? And then a simple example of array. So let's say I already talked about if you have an array of size 2 or 3 and you're trying to access an element of array which is at size 7. Since that element doesn't exist, it will throw an array index out of bounds exception, which is an unchecked exception or an illegal argument type of exception, right? So these were checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions, right? And I think we already explained this errors. So errors are not exceptions; they are something which is beyond, beyond the exception or beyond the control of programmer, right? And these exceptions we cannot handle, right? So errors are typically ignored in our code because you cannot do anything for it. So let's say there was an issue with memory, right? You can actually create this error in your program. You just write a for loop in your program and create an object. Continuously create an object. So since our compiler, for each object creation, it has to give some memory, right, to the object. So since it will be in a for loop, unstoppable loop, sure at some point of time your memory will go out. Your system will go out of memory. Your application will go out of memory, and it will throw a stack overflow error. And on this name, we have a full-fledged website, Stack Overflow, right? If you have visited it. So, any questions so far on this exception type, exception hierarchy? Anyone?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Like
Anybody else?
high level, like error, can you explain broader?
I think as of now, this should be enough for you to understand,
Yeah, okay, fine.
right?
While
I'm not
doing
getting
the
like
mini
what
project,
kind of border you're expecting. So since this class is specific to
yeah, like while doing the project, like if you face those kind of issues, like
see, as we already explained, errors are out of scope of programmer, right? And
yeah,
since
which
we
cannot
all
be
are
handled by the programmer.
programmers, yeah. So
Yeah.
errors can be handled at your JVM level. You can say, if you want to, if you aspire to become a JVM designer, or you want to contribute in open source, since Java is open source and or Linux is open source, you can contribute in those. Then probably want to focus on handling errors, right? Since our scope of this session is for programmers, so we'll focus on exceptions only, right?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, great, thank you. Now we talked a lot about what are exceptions, what are the different types of exceptions that we have. Now if somebody asks, how do you handle an exception programmatically, right? So how do we do that? Experienced guys, anybody? How do we usually handle exceptions in a program, in a Java
Try
program?
catch and using throws.
Try catch.
That's right.
Try catch.
Yeah, yeah, perfect, perfect. Anybody on the chat? Okay, yes, core Java is enough to crack interview, but then we'll talk about it later after the session, right? Let's finish it off first. Okay, so yep, you are right. There are two ways to handle exceptions programmatically. That is using try, catch, and finally block, which will be written by Java programmer and handled by Java programmer itself, and using throws keyword. Okay. Throws is written by us, but then it is handled, or the errors are propagated by Java environment. We are not doing it. Right. So a very basic example of try, catch, finally here. I'll do one thing. I think I have the program. Yeah. So I have written the exact same program here. Right? Okay. So what we did here. So we have this class called try, catch, finally execution, right, or exception. Okay. Now we talked about arrays. So what I am doing here, I'm declaring an array with name A. Okay. And here I'm telling this array to be of size 2. Okay. So this is an object we are declaring size. So it will have only 2 integer type of variables. Okay. So it basically its size is 2, right? Now let's say we want to access element at 0. Okay. Or maybe, yeah, I'll just put it very simple. Okay. So you can see at position 0, or the first place, we have this element 1, right? Now at second place, since arrays start from 0, so 0, A of 0 means first position, A of 1 means second position. So at second position, what do we have? We have
2.
2. That's right. Right. So we have 2 here. Now, if I want to access an element which is at position
Array export
3,
exception thrown.
that's correct. So what happens here, since we do not have an element at third position, this line will throw an exception, right?
Catch block will handle that exception.
Yeah, that's right. So to handle this exception, what we have in the try block, we have to write a catch block. So this is like, it's a, we have to use these 3 keywords. So whatever wrong can go with an application, or if we are expecting on this code or this method or this line we'll put all of that stuff in try block, right? So these 3 blocks. Try block is for something which may go wrong. Okay. And catch block means what if something goes wrong in try, that will be handled here in catch block. Okay. Hope you understand. So catch block is our savior here. It will help us to catch the exception which has come up in try block. And then we have at the end finally block. Okay. Finally is not actually used anywhere in exception handling. Finally is just a way to store or sorry to show something or to do something even if something goes wrong in try block or catch is not able to handle it. Okay. So let's say there was an exception which nobody could handle, nobody had anticipated, and that exception comes. But then still to the user, we wanted to show that at least one line that something went wrong, we will correct it again. Something like this. Something went wrong. Okay. We will fix this. Something like this. Okay. So finally, will execute at any cost. So that's the condition of finally. Try will have the code that has issues. Okay. Catch will handle the code, or catch will handle the exception which has come up in the try block, but finally will print or it will show or anything it can call. It's like a normal block, you can do anything from finally. Okay. So it will show you or it will close the resources in case you're using database connection, right? Or have opened the file to close the files if you're working with input output streams. So in that case, finally comes very handy. Right, I hope you understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any doubts, any questions so far? Anybody?
Like, in which order we have to give the catch block?
Just a second. Yep, what was the question again?
And like, what is the order? Like, we have to specify the catch blocks.
Okay, yeah. Before that, I wanted to highlight one point. So guys, what happens usually? We can have one try, but we can have multiple catch blocks. Okay. You can have n number of catch blocks. Okay. What kind of exception is this? Index out of bound or array index out of bound?
Yes.
We just saw that, right? For the newcomers, I'm not sure if you're getting what I'm doing here. So anybody getting what I'm doing here? Yeah, so what I did, I have written one try block, okay, and because I'm anticipating or I'm expecting this code which is written inside try block to go wrong, okay, but then I'm not sure what kind of issue that can be. Or let's say there's a lot of code inside try block. So we have statement 1, statement 2, we have statement 3. Yeah, there is one method call, okay, it will go somewhere. Okay, we have one more call, it will call some other method. So there's a lot of stuff that we expect to go wrong here. Okay, but then to handle all the conditions that we expect, what do? We need to have multiple catch blocks. Okay, let's say this call, it can have an issue. Let's say it can have null pointer exception, or another call block, it can have some other issue. Let's say index out of bounds exception, or another call block can have another issue, right? So multiple issues. Now if we want to handle all those issues, what we do, we have to catch all of them one by one. Okay, but then we need to take care of one thing, that all these catch blocks, they have to follow one hierarchy. Okay, so which goes like this: exception class has to be specific. It goes from specific to generic, right? So exception is the parent of all exceptions, runtime is child of exception, index out of bounds is child of runtime exception, and array index out of bounds is again child of index out of bounds exception. So that's how it goes. So this is the smallest one, second highest. This is greater than that. Okay, if you talk about complete hierarchy, we have seen that hierarchy here, it's right. So from exception, if you go down, we have runtime exception, then we have index out of bounds, array index out of bounds. So that's how we need to mention catch blocks. We can have n number of catch blocks, right? And you can mention your specific message here, that this issue happened because of array index. This issue happened because of index out of bounds. Anything or any custom message that you want to show. Yeah. And then in the end, if you're closing some resources or your database, open database, or you have some file system, you're working with file system, so you can write it here, or simply for the sake of showing a method to your message to the user that something happened, and since we couldn't handle it, we are at least showing you one message. Now what to do next. Okay. You can have a message like call us on this number or email us on this number if you see some issue, right? So that's about try with multiple catch blocks and a finally plan. Okay. I hope you understand, right? So with that, I wanted to show you a different kind of exception handling way that was introduced in Java 7, right? Java 7 came up with this way. So whatever resource you are opening, or if you see here, we are working on file system, right? So we have opened one file here. We are using this file. Okay. So we have opened it. Now, usually or ideally, will always close this file, okay, in finally block. But then what happened earlier, programmers will just open the file and they will forget to have this finally block and close that, right? To avoid that, Java 7 came up with this feature, try with resources. Okay? This is called try with the resources. So here we have this resource, this file, which we opened or which we used in our system. And once this code is executed inside try block, if it is handled, if exception came or not, that's not an issue. If once it is used, our Java 7 compiler will automatically close it. Okay. So that's the condition here. It will automatically close the resources that it had opened, which will save us memory leaks. So the only thing that we have to take care is these classes have to extend auto closable. I'll just show you here. We talked about this. So these are multiple catch blocks, right? So all these classes, they have to implement auto closable interface. Okay. So if these classes are using this or implementing auto closable, it will automatically call a method called dot close after the execution of this try block. Okay, so that's the condition. Okay, that's the functionality provided by Java runtime. I hope you understand. Are you guys with me?
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, sir.
So what happened? We need not write finally block here. Got it? So I would recommend you guys, if you're using in programs, right? I would recommend you to go with this way of writing exception handling and not the usual way or Java 6 way of writing. So yeah, that's about
And
private resources.
if we are having multiple resources to
Yeah.
close,
Yes. We can have multiple here itself. That's the way. So you can have multiple resources. So here we had one. We can have one more after this.
okay.
Java gives us that functionality. Okay. So yeah, we talked about one way of handling, that is try catch with or without finally. Okay. And one more thing I wanted to tell you, I have not shown in program. Always avoid using return statements in finally block, because if you write return statements, it will overtake or it will override everything that was written in finally. Okay. So avoid using return statements in finally block. So that was about try catch. So we had one more way that we talked about, which was throws. Okay. Try catch finally is completely handled and written by programmer. Throws is written by programmer and handled by Java environment, right? So I will show you how do we use throw. So in try catch, we have to write the code which has issue inside try block. You have to handle it inside catch block, and we have to use finally to close it automatically in the end, right? But then when we talk about throws way, we are not writing it in any block. Our method, which we expect can have some exception, we just need to write this word throws, and this method throws this type of exception, right? You can write any exception here. You can write an runtime exception. You can have your custom exceptions written. Okay. So here you can see we have used an example. Let's say divide. So our division variable is trying to divide 8 by 0, which is mathematically incorrect, right? And Java JVM understands that. So did you notice here I am using throws exception here also? Let me just remove it. So what happened? Since only this method has exception, we have written throws here. But then, as we are calling this method exception method, in this method main we have to write it here also. I just wanted to show you that. Okay. So if you're calling it from some method, you have to write it there also. Okay. Now the program execution will start from main, and inside main there's nothing, there's just a call to this method. So it will directly go here, and the compiler will try to divide 8 by 0. It will throw an exception, and let us see how it looks. Okay. So it has automatically thrown an exception called arithmetic exception. Okay. Or divide by 0 exception. Okay. And we did nothing here. We have just written this keyword throws. Okay. Fine. Any questions so far on try catch finally, or Java 7 way of handling exceptions using try catch, or this throws? Okay. So these are two ways. Okay. I see there is. Okay, Akriti has some question. If why throw keyword is needed to throw exception in our program. The same thing can be done with if else. See, if else is a conditional statement, right? It's not used to handle exception first of all. Okay. So if you have written why use throw keyword to throw exception in our program, if same thing we can do with if else. No, we cannot do. We cannot handle exceptions in if else. Okay. I'm not sure what your question is, but then this is not a right state. If else is just a condition which will tell you if you are not doing this, do that. Okay. Now about throw keyword. I don't know if you're talking about throw or throws because we have not used or we have not introduced throw keyword till now, and we have handled two different types of exceptions, right? One is using try catch blocks and one is using throws keyword. Correct? So Akriti has written some code about age. Sure, I'll come to that. I actually have an example ready with this kind of logic only regarding age. We'll come to that. So that was about try catch and throws. Okay. Then we come to custom exceptions. So are we guys good till now? And one more thing I wanted to mention. So when the compiler is using autoclosable, it will call close method of this autoclosable interface to close the resources automatically, right? Can we close all the resources that include this may be an interview question. Fine, guys. So yep, I'll come to Akriti's question of age. So first, let's go through it. If a person's age is less than 18 and he's not eligible to vote, then in that case we can represent situation with if else also. Okay. Then why do we use keyword to throw exception? I have one doubt. Why throw keyword? Yeah. Okay. If a person's age is less than 18. Okay. So if, as I already told, if else statement is used for conditions, right? For sure, yes, you can use if else in this kind of. So if the person is 18 years old, do something, let them vote. Okay, if that person is less than 18, do not let them vote. Okay, so that's the way to do it. But then this is just a very basic example of showing this. So you can have any example for that matter, just to explain this concept of custom exception. But then yeah, in your case, what you have written, we don't have to use this logic. Okay, it's all about it all depends on the logic. If else can be used in this example, yes, to show ages, to show the difference of age. That's for sure. Yeah. Okay.
Exception can come in else block also.
That's right. Yeah, no, but then her problem is, or the condition that she's telling, if you're designing a system, okay, wherein the system is showing one feature to users who are 18 plus, and that system is not showing that feature to the users who are less than 18. Okay. So how do we design that? Surely you can design it using if else. Okay. So what you will do using if else, you will completely restrict. That means user will not be able to access that functionality at all. I hope you understand. Right. So what we are talking about when we are talking about using exception handling, everybody can able to sign in, but then only few people who are eligible for that functionality are can actually view that content. So then what is the use of throw keyword? Throw keyword is completely different. This is used in writing custom exceptions. That's what I'm about to explain after this, right? Why would anyone want to throw exceptions in their program? Sure, good question. I'll explain that. So let me explain your question by our program. So why would anyone want to? Let's say you are designing one application, right? You are working with Facebook, and Facebook tells you this feature. Or let's say if we talk about Twitter, Twitter will give you. Or let's say you were completely new when Twitter was being built. I hope you know that Twitter will let you write content which is just 160 characters limit, right? If you want to write a big paragraph which is more than 160 characters, you cannot do it in Twitter, right? So let's say at that time you were a developer at Twitter, and they asked you to write this functionality, or if somebody entered, okay, and they tweeted, then throw that error on the screen to show user that you cannot write something beyond 160 or 140 characters. Okay, so at that time you have to write custom exceptions. That's how it is done. Or let's say you are an employee at Paytm, or you are an employee at HDFC Bank or any other bank, and and when after making a payment, let's say your payment failed, right? So you have to show to the user that this payment has failed and this exception has occurred. Okay, you cannot use generic exception. You have to write specific exception, that this exception has occurred because of this reason, because network went down, because you do not have enough balance, because this user has blocked you. So when you have user defined exception, or when you have problem which are specific to you, you write specific exceptions to handle those specific problems, right? If somebody has blocked you on Facebook, let's say, right, and you try to access their account, so what is the message that you see on Facebook? It will simply show you that this user has blocked you, you cannot access their account. So at the back end, they have written this exception, that user has blocked, or user blocked exception. Definitely they have some code inside it, they have some functionality. But then in the end, they have to throw this message to the user that you cannot see their profile, right? That is using user defined exceptions or custom exceptions. Okay. And to write custom exceptions, you have to use throw keyword in Java. Okay. To give example of your case only, you're not, yeah, surely yes, you can do using if else, but if using if else, you are completely ignoring one case or the other. What I'm saying is, you are already there, okay, you are in the application, okay, and since you are in the application, if someone has blocked me, then this would happen. Surely you can do, yes, why not? But then if you're already in the application, as we talked about 18 plus case, right? So I'll tell you what is the difference. You're not getting the difference between if else and exceptions, right? If else is a condition that you already know this is a condition, or this may be the condition. If this, fine. If not this, then this. Okay. If else conditions are conditions that a programmer already knows. Okay? But exception is something that we do not know, that can happen anytime, right? You leave about programmer, even a JVM, our compiler doesn't know about exceptions, right? Exception is something which is unexpected, correct? So yes, if you're telling, I understand that this program for sure can be written using if else, but then to demonstrate the use of user defined exception, we have taken we're using this example. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so got it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So how to write a custom exception? Okay. So in our case, let's say we were designing an application, uh, yeah, voting kind of application, or a dating app, let's say Tinder or Happen, or a similar application, wherein we want users to be of at least this minimum age, right? So age is our defining factor there. So we have to write this invalid age exception. We have to create this user defined exception called invalid age exception. And we have to extend the main hierarchy class called exception class. So this is how it is done. To write a custom exception class, you have to give class your class name, exception class name, which will extend exception class, and you have to call constructor. Okay. Itself. Constructor means method with same name. So I have called this. Okay. And you have to again call this constructor of your superclass, which is exception class. So this is just a binding way to pass on the message. Okay. Now inside your class custom exception, we'll look at this method main method. What happens here? Maybe I'll just show you here programmatically. So here invalid age exception has extended exception class. This is very important. You have to write it followed by constructor. Inside constructor, you have to call the constructor of your parent class. We do that using super keyword. Okay. And you have to pass on this message. This is just to propagate the message, right? Now, in our class, we can see we have this main method here, and you have written try catch block. Inside try block, we have called this validate method. Okay. This validate method, we are passing 18. Okay. And that is taking as if else. Okay. If age is less than 18, okay, what we'll do, we'll use this throw keyword to call our custom made exception. So how do we write it? Throw new invalidate age exception, and we write this message, age is less than 18. So this message, what happens when we write new and class name, this will create an object and it will call constructor. So from here, the program will move to this line, okay, to the constructor of your custom exception class. Okay. And it will pass on this message here, and again this super will pass on the message to your main class exception class. Okay. And you'll see this issue. Else, normal program execution. Okay. So try and catch has, we have again given catch here. Okay. And normal rest of the code. So I just want to show you using program. What happened here? I passed 18. Since 18 is greater than age, I mean, it doesn't match this condition. It will go to else. It will normally run this. Welcome, you are eligible to vote. Okay. It will go back here. Since there was no exception, it will not go inside catch block, and it will go to rest of the program. Okay. Now, instead of 18, if I had written 17, then what happens? So what happened here, since this condition is okay, it will go here. Okay. And it will throw an exception, and I already told you the flow. It will call the constructor of your custom exception class, and from there it will again call super constructor of your parent class called exception. Okay. And using exception, you actually see this code, this output on your screen. Fine. I hope I made some sense while explaining exceptions, right? So guys, is this clear? That was about today's session. Can we throw an exception manually? Correct. Yes, you can throw. We have already done that. But just now we were doing that. This is the manual way of throwing exception. You actually do not need to write, let's say a very basic example. I'll just remove this. Okay, no need of if-else conditions. I can call this any any exception, let's say program fault. Let's say we had hardware attached to our system and something went wrong with that hardware. Okay. Okay. So I think now you can understand why do we, what's the difference between an if-else condition and an exception, right? If-else condition cannot handle this kind of issue, right? So let's say we had a hardware connected to our system, okay, and that hardware was removed abruptly or crashed or something happened, okay. Then what we'll do, we'll throw a custom exception using throw new keyword, okay. Throw new program exception, and it will give us this, okay. Validate, or you can just write method name as check hardware, test hardware, okay. So if you try to run this, it will throw you this issue. Hardware was removed or crashed abruptly. Okay. So guys, with this, we complete basic Java. We complete concepts, and we have complete exception handling today, right? If you have any questions, let me know. Superclass hasn't thrown any exception, then why child class do not throw check exception? I do not get your question here. If superclass hasn't thrown any exception, see what happens here. Superclass is not throwing exception. Exception is just a class at top hierarchy. Your class is throwing exception, okay, and your class is throwing exception using a functionality which is provided by superclass. Okay, this is just a way to connect with superclass to help you throw the exception, right? Okay, if parent class hasn't thrown any exception, then why child class cannot throw checked exception? I am not getting your question. If parent class hasn't thrown any exception, let's say we talk about, okay, let's say you're talking about parent child kind of, okay, hasn't thrown any exception, then why can't not exception? So what I understand from your question is you're talking about a parent and child class concept wherein we are propagating exception. So a simple answer, parent class is not responsible for throwing exception, okay. it's a child class which will throw exception first of all, and that exception will be propagated back to the parent class as well. Okay. So that means your child class will also show exception along with parent class, right? So in the start itself, I explained three ways, right? We had, let's say, method one, method two, method three, and all these methods were in multiple classes, were in different classes, and the exception came at method C, right? So method C will throw exception and it will go back to method B, which is in class B. Again, class B will throw that message, okay, throw that exception, and again it will go back to A, class A, and that method of class A will throw that exception. Okay. So, yep, I think we are good. Any more questions? Hope you got. Fine. If everybody is clear, maybe we can just wind up this session, right? Just. Fine, maybe I'll just mute it. Fine, guys. Thank you. Thank you for attending the session. We'll let you know about further sessions on this core Java. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thanks, Raman, for very good session. See, so some of the guys are already left because it was very long session, 1.5 hours of session. So guys, we will circulate a feedback form. Please share your honest feedback, and if you have any questions, you can directly message on our WhatsApp, and we will try to solve your problems. So thank you everyone. Thank you for attending this session. Bye. Take care.